It's the year 2024, and you've got to explain to your small child that there was a time in history where not all men were created equal. A dark time in which we all had to come to grips with the fact that Denzel Washington was credited after Matthew Broderick. I take it that's not a world that I want to live in. Welcome to Half-Ass Movie Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Half-Ass Movie Podcast, a show where we put together a half-ass theme as an excuse to watch movies. My name is Adam Portress, and joining me today, his ears perked up when he heard biscuits and gravy, Bruce Leslie.
If loving Ferris Bueller is wrong, I don't want to be right.
Nah. Welcome back, everybody. We are continuing on. Sweet Sean Kovac's out this week. Do not worry. He'll be back. He'll want to be back for next week. Next week's going to be a big one. We'll talk about that. But this week, we are still on headliner Matthew Broderick. Bruce, so far, how do you feel about the category that you kind of birthed accidentally?
I think it's been wonderful. I've loved this month so far. I've liked all the movie selections. I think we've had good conversation. Nothing's been quite like I remembered it. So it's all really cool.
Yeah, and again, something that's kind of come out of nowhere. And again, for those of you if this is your first headliner Matthew Broderick episode, the idea of this series is that Matthew Broderick became this big giant star and everything. But unfortunately, there was one small weird thing that kind of kept coming up in a lot of his movies, is that Matthew Broderick would would headline, and then one of his co-stars would, after that movie, never be billed after him again.
Yeah, they would surpass him in the old Q score. Is that what they used to call it? The Q score?
I don't know if they called it back then, but it certainly ended up being called that at some point or another. But with Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Charlie Sheen came in, and then, that was his kind of first movie and stuff. And then boom, Charlie Sheen was a million times bigger than Matthew Broderick at that point. Then last week we had, what was it again?
Helen Hunt with Project X.
That's right. Your Helen Hunt connection there and everything. She would go on to much bigger things and whatnot. And this week we got Matthew Broderick in Glory, co-starring with second in command, Denzel Washington. Second build up here and everything. So we'll talk about where all that kind of came from.
Probably build fourth.
Okay. There's a weird thing. I think technically he's got the Bruce Willis credit, so to speak, which is to say at the end of all of them.
So that kind of has its own prestige with it.
Exactly. It's almost kind of like, we put you in this little special spot, and Bruce Willis as the Beaver.
Which I would watch that reboot in a heartbeat.
He comes in, it's just a fully grown man and leave it to Beaver. But we don't change his parents' age or nothing. Eddie Haskell, all the same.
You remember like the guest appearances he made on Friends?
Vaguely.
I'm kind of picturing like that era of Bruce Willis as the Beaver.
Yeah. Just the we're not quite Bruno days.
I'd like to see him get bullied at school by an actual 11-year-old. It would just be hilarious.
Wasn't that movie, The Kid? Or is that, I don't know what that movie was about. All I remember is that trailer going, boy, Bruce Willis' star's fallen an awful long way here, hasn't it?
I don't think I've seen that one. I don't know.
It was his bad area where it's Bruce Willis.
Hawk era?
No, it's after that. This is way later. This was kind of, I don't want to say Twilight. I don't know. I'm talking out my butt here. I don't remember what these years were and everything. I just remember him looking like a doofus on the cover of that poster and everything. So anyways,
back on track.
We're not talking about that. We're talking about Matthew Broderick here in the Glory from 1989, directed by Ed Zwick. This is again one that Denzel would co-star with him with this. And now this isn't Denzel's first starring role here or everything. He actually headlined a couple of movies before this, but this was kind of the one that would go off. And we'll talk about all that, how this movie itself came about. Because while we are called Half-Ass Movie Podcast, Bruce, I got to tell you, it doesn't feel like I half-assed it this week.
I feel like we're 3/4 of an ass this week.
At least 3/4 of an ass this week, despite being down one of our asses. How about that? Isn't that something
I
or
know,
other?
one less ass. Less ass is more ass sometimes.
Sometimes it be like that.
You know what they say? The ass is always cleaner on the other side of the fence.
Listen, it's down. It's Bartlett's for a reason, folks.
We miss you, Sean.
But anyway, what was it? Let's just get into this. Patreon.com/HMP, man. Those people are awesome. They get pre-show, post-show, Dinger Zone, and they get the upcoming Sean Loves spaceships that he's working on. That's what I'm going to say he's doing right now. I don't know if it's necessarily true, but that's what we're going to say he's doing right now, is that he's just banking more and more of these sweet Sean's He Loves spaceships episodes and stuff like that. So get on board with that, and we'll have other things coming down there as well. Something like Bruce Loves, what was it, burgers or something like that?
Yes.
Wasn't that what
Bruce loves burgers, man. I sure.
He just rolls in. It's like, this one's got
kinds of
cheese
crazy
on it,
things,
you know?
man.
I've
I've said all kinds of crazy things. Anything's possible.
He's not responsible for what he does. And so patreon.com/HMP, whatever you think this show is worth, just send it our way. If it's $1, $5, whatever that is, get yourself some more content at the exact same time, and make sure that independent shows like us stay alive. There's so many other shows out there where you're listening to 10, 15 minutes worth of commercials for bull crap that you will never buy. We don't want to waste your time like that. Patreon.com/HMP. Love you. Or go over to, if you can't do that, at least send us a email at halfasspod@gmail.com, or go review us on iTunes. 5 stars is always fun. I don't know how much it helps or whatever, but it certainly couldn't hurt. It couldn't hurt you, could it? Could it?
Probably not.
Let's get into it, Bruce. Here's the IMDb plotline for Glory. As we know, IMDb 100% correct in everything they say and or do. Robert Gould Shaw leads the U.S. Civil War's first all-black volunteer company, fighting prejudices from both his Union Army and the Confederates. This is directed by Edward Zwick, who did 30-something, Legends of the Fall, Courage Under Fire, The Siege, The Last Samurai, Defiance, Blood Diamond, and more. Written by Kevin Jarre, who did Rambo First Blood Part 2, Tombstone, Devil's Own, and The Mummy from the 90s. And this is based on the book by Lincoln Kirsten Peter Bouchard, based upon the letters of Robert Shaw. This is starring Matthew Broderick, Denzel Washington, Cary Elwes, Morgan Freeman, Andre Braugher, and Jimmy Kennedy, I believe his name is. So yeah, 1989. I did not see this in 1989. My movie in 1989 was Batman. I think that was the only one that we were actually allowed to watch in this.
1989 is a little misleading because it had a limited release like in December 1989. But most people would have thought of this as a February 1990 release in the U.S.
Because it came in for like Oscar consideration and all that kind of good stuff at the end of the year, but would really make its money at the beginning.
The brief thing in Oscar season, but it actually got its wide release in Black History Month. And that's a whole lot I wanted to talk about. It was like, I was a high school kid when this came out, and this was really being pushed and portrayed as this big breakthrough in Hollywood finally understanding the black experience. Like, this was supposed to be a big deal in giving black folks their due. But at the same time, it's just kind of funny that a movie that's supposed to be about increasing the visibility of the contribution of black folks does want to put Matthew Broderick first on the movie poster, and they want to bill him first. I still even remember, once again, in 1990, this was out in theaters. They're showing it to us in school in 1991. Like, this is one you watched in school because it was that significant. And we watched it for Black History Month. And I remember the teacher holding up the VHS box, which looks like the picture I sent you there, Adam, and the picture that you're using as show art for this week. And when he held it up, really the only thing you could see on the box was Matthew Broderick. Like, you couldn't really see Denzel and Morgan Freeman very well because the way the guy was holding it and where his thumb was and everything. So somehow Black History Month, he's holding up a picture of what looks to me like Ferris Bueller wearing a disguise, because that stupid Van Dyke facial hair thing, his eyes even look like he's about to get caught doing something he's not supposed to. So immediately, like, I'm giggling. A couple of the other boys in the room are giggling. Then the teacher gets really angry because the teacher thinks we're being disrespectful to Black history or whatever. But I mean, I just couldn't look. If you only think of Matthew Broderick as Ferris Bueller, and then you see that picture thrown up in your face in school without warning, and you haven't seen it before, you're going to giggle at that, man.
Oh yeah, listen, man. The times that things can catch you off guard, you know what one of the most hilarious caught off guard moments like that for me was was it was like me and my brother and a couple of our friends and everything, and we go to see some movie. I don't remember what the actual movie was that we went to see, but we saw the trailers and stuff, and there was a joke in South Park about all independent movies is about gay cowboys eating pudding. And then this was when they showed the Brokeback Mountain trailer. We about had a heart attack. We were like, no. They didn't eat pudding in the trailer, but it was as close as you could get. We thought we had just like conjured and made something up. We were just like, how is this even possible? So sometimes things can take you a little bit by storm where you're just like, whoa, this is not what I was expecting at all. Also, it's just like, this isn't a gay cowboy movie, is it? Holy cow, it's a gay cowboy movie. Unreal. Who'd have thought? But so here's the thing. So I'll tell you about when I kind of first saw this. My guess is I was trying to put together years numbered here for us and everything, because as I said, I didn't see this in 89, 90. I would say I probably saw this either 93 or 94 in middle school. And I remember seeing it specifically even, I don't know how they showed it to us like this, but they brought us into the auditorium, which so I went to I live in a small little town in the South and everything. And so every school that I kind of went to was like a previous school, so my middle school used to be the high school. And then my elementary school used to be the high school. Yeah. So
people don't understand, but when you grow up in certain parts of the South and maybe the Appalachian region, you get hand-me-down schools.
Yeah. So ours was definitely like, this used to be the high school here. And so, but for whatever reason, they brought us down into the auditorium and stuff, which we never really did too often. But then they had a projector up. Again, I don't know how they afforded this or whatever, but showed us Glory. And I think I was fairly certain I knew who Denzel Washington was at that point, but I think that was the moment where it was just like the sky parted, and I was just like, oh, this is somebody who you're going to have to be watching from this point on. He just had that kind of charisma and stuff like that, and we'll talk about how all that kind of came about and everything. But you're right, Matthew Broderick is the number one reason why this movie got made in the first place.
It's kind of crazy.
Zwick had been trying to kind of put something together like this for quite some time. Turns out he was actually a big Civil War fan when he was a kid and whatnot, in as much as he also got his mom to bring him to Civil War sites and stuff like that when he was a kid. So it was something that he was, fairly interested in and everything. They finally put together this stuff, and ultimately it was just like, you guys can sell it if you have, a star or whatever. And he didn't, necessarily want to think about Matthew Broderick or anything, but, he was Ferris Bueller. Why would we think this would be the guy that would do this? But certainly, it turns out Matthew Broderick knew a little bit about the character, knew a little bit about, the background of the character, which will definitely come into play here with his own life. There's a lot of interesting Matthew Broderick and his and Shaw parallels in a lot of senses. But he was basically just like, listen, you put Matthew Broderick in this movie, you pretty much, get to do whatever you want. That was kind of the deal. They were just like, he's hot enough at this point. We understand that this might not, be the smartest move or whatever, but how we're trying to sell this, we're doing it. And when we do that, you can do whatever you want. And so he's like,
if they made this movie 3 years later, it would have been Adam Sandler they had.
Oh man. So Denzel was the second choice, was the choice for the second lead, in this more or less. After Broderick, he was just like, I'd met with Denzel, once or twice when he was, working in television, while Ed Zwick was working in television and stuff as well. He was kind of wanting to break out. Denzel had starred in a couple of little small movies and stuff at this point, but nothing to this nature and everything. So he finally gets him on board and everything. Here's kind of the Denzel story with some of this. As he's got all of his people in there, he's got, Morgan Freeman, who he had seen, go through many different forms of his career and everything. But there's this, and isn't it awesome that Morgan Freeman is 1,000,000 years old in 1989?
I love it. It's he's 1,000,000 years old in the early 80s Electric Company episodes that he's in.
It's just like you were born 900 years old. He
was born old and stayed that way.
Stayed that way forever. Andre Braugher in this also. Pretty friggin' awesome. Guess what? This is his first time on screen ever.
I didn't know that.
He'd never done anything previous to this. They got him in this movie almost by happenstance, right? They were like, the world was kind of conspiring against them. He was graduating Juilliard that evening, right?
Oh, man.
And one of Ed Zwick's kind of partners, she was just like, hey, you've got to come see this guy. So they battled like a blizzard or whatever in New York to go to this Juilliard graduation and everything. They see this guy and they were just like, that's the dude. That's the guy for the role right here. And they offered it to him kind of, no audition, no nothing. He just kind of got in there. He was so green. He had no clue what stuff was. When they were like, the cinematographer was just like, oh shoot, he screwed that up because, we put a mark on the ground for him to stand on, but like, he just didn't stand there. He just kind of went off and did whatever he wanted to. And he's like, Andre, you need to stop on your mark. He's like, what's a mark? He had no idea. He just didn't know. And he showed it to him. And then he became so fastidious at that point that he never missed an entire mark again. He was just one of those like, oh, I'm never screwing this up ever again. So he was from the get-go, that guy was just like, the uber professional dude here and everything. And then the other guy, our third guy here from South Carolina, he was actually from North Carolina and what a great invention for this character and everything that this guy did. And that was pretty much all of his invention. All of these characters, while their pages were written and everything, they very much kind of improv'd and figured out all of their own stuff, ahead of time and whatnot, as you might imagine. Because if you look through a lot of the script, you're going to be like, did a couple of white guys write this? I hope not.
Oh, no.
Because some of it's pretty rough. But the amount of, so they're all in there. All these guys are doing their kind of like blocking and rehearsals and stuff like that. And Denzel is not doing great. Denzel's kind of slacking off and he's just kind of giving sort of the minimum here and everything. And all the other guys around him are like, they're having a good time. They're always, Morgan's always in 100% on everything that he's doing and stuff. So everybody's really getting into it. But like, Zwick's like, I'm not quite sure if, I know he's a good actor, but like, I can't lie to you. I got a little bit nervous for this thing here and everything. And so the day of the show comes, and they're all, it's one of the tent scenes. They're getting all the guys together and whatnot, and Denzel doesn't show up. They're like, what's going on here? What's happening? Okay, no, well, Denzel, he's still in makeup. It'll be like 5 minutes, and then it's like 15 minutes, and he finally shows up, and he's just like, when Denzel walked into that set, you saw the character. He went there, he got to that thing, and it was just like, it was the most electric thing he'd ever seen in his entire life. He was just like, he knew right there that what they were doing, especially with Denzel, was just like something wildly special, because he was like, Denzel just reserves all of this stuff. It's not there until it's there, and when it's time to get there, boom, it all floods out.
You know what it felt like to me? It felt like to me like he knew, this is my shot. Kind of like, I'm not going to throw away my shot there from Hamilton. But he knew, like, I'm not going to hold anything back. I'm going to give it everything I've got. I'm going to do this perfect, because if I don't do this, there may not be another movie. I really got the feeling like he left it all on the field, as it were. Like, this is the championship match. That's just how it felt to me, because his performance here is ridiculously good. I mean, it's no question he deserved that Oscar that he won for this performance. And I think I've always remembered Denzel as a good actor, and it had been a long time since I'd seen this movie, and watching it again and just seeing what he can do and how subtle he is, and thinking that this is his first big kind of feature where he's carrying a lot of weight and a lot of people looking at him, and just how well he pulls off some very difficult scenes, like the scene where he's being flogged.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I got a story about that.
I think it's the best performance I've seen of his. I'll say I haven't seen everything he's ever done, but it's certainly going to probably go down as better than Training Day in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly very different performances, no doubt. So the story with the flogging and everything, so they'd kind of talked about it ahead of time. Well, not a ton about it, but and so they had like a special kind of cord that was made out of, nothing that would really hurt you or anything, fairly soft and whatnot. Even Zwick was like, listen, can you hit me with that? I want to know, what it feels like. Which I think is a good thing. If you're a director or something like that, you should be, probably willing to take something just to kind of, he's like, and it stung a little bit to let you know, just enough to let you know that it was there, but it didn't hurt you, just enough to get you a little bit. And so, they had kind of the move here and everything of the push in to Denzel's face here and all this kind of good stuff. And obviously with the weight of the scene, with what's going on, with what's being depicted, what's being asked not only of Denzel, but of the other characters that are, number one, the guy who's, whipping him, then the others that are standing by and watching. It's just like no one wants to have to go through that more times than one would necessarily want to, right? As few as you can. So they do the first one. Does really, really well, and they get that time and push in on Denzel's face there and everything. And so the first time they go through, whip crack 1, 2, 3, and we're pushing on his face at this point. And so, obviously we're dealing with film here and everything, so you can't really go back and quickly look at what you're doing. So while that went well and everything, he was like, we need to do like just at least one more for safety here. So it goes through. And again, we kind of have that same sort of thing. Denzel is giving his fantastic performance. /1, 2, 3, we push in. And Denzel is doing everything in his can. He's still acting his ass off at this point, right? He's keeping everything in because obviously the idea of what's going on here is this character's not, relenting. He's not giving in. He's going to take this punishment and not give this person the satisfaction of reacting in any particular way. So goes through, does those 3. But Zwick's like, something in me is just like, I don't know if we're there yet. Don't know if we're 100% there yet. So he tells Denzel, it's like, hey, there's just one little thing with the camera. I promise this will be our last time. No more after this, but just one more just because of the little camera thing, whatever. And he's like, okay. And so as he goes back, they reset and everything. And he goes to the actor that whips him and goes, don't stop until I tell you. Don't, until I call cut. And the other guy's like, he wasn't quite sure, but understood kind of the assignment of what was kind of going on here and everything. And so as it goes on, it is what you kind of see in the film. It is that shot was the final one that they did, that Denzel was not aware that it was going to go on past 3. But Zwick says, like, I knew what I was doing was a little bit, could be considered bad. You never just, but at the same time too, you're an artist and you kind of want to get there. And he's like, I knew Denzel wouldn't break character. I knew he wouldn't do it. I knew he would just sit there. And so while he had, within those previous 2 takes and everything, done a lot of the same performance, that not giving in, that not, relenting and everything, 3 straps was not what was going to do it. It had to kind of keep going on. And so we keep that camera there, and then like we save the push in till all the way towards the end. But watching that, you can just see it through Denzel as he's gone beyond that point, and he realizes right now that this is where I am. This is where I am in this right now. And that's what gets that final single tear to catch and fall down and make it, the ultimate, iconic image of this entire film. And so as they call cut, as he finishes and everything, he goes over to Denzel, once he kind of cools down for half a second, kind of, puts his hand on his shoulder and everything, brushes him off and whatnot, as you might imagine. But later on, he was okay with it because he knew why he did what he did. And ultimately, now, and then again, he worked with Ed Zwick several times later. So don't, they formed a fantastic relationship and everything. But it was that one point that he kind of needed. And like what Zwick kind of talks about as far as like Denzel's process and everything goes, is that he has kind of a weird, interesting dichotomy. There's so much of him inside that has like a spirituality and and a happiness and everything, but there is a very dark and angry side as well that's always kind of sitting in the background and ready to jump out at any particular moment. And a lot of what he thinks Denzel's kind of process is definitely working with a lot of, anger and stuff like that. And while it might seem like on the set and stuff that it's all, he's mad at him or whatever, ultimately at the end, it's not that at all. They realized that they had to get there, but that is indeed part of like Denzel's process that he would find out later on is like, your boy gets angry. But I believe that was the moment right there. Like, again, in middle school where you're just watching this happen and this guy go through and then just drop, while being whipped, not relenting in any way. And then that single solitary tear fall and everything. I did not know the Oscars had already happened at this point, but I was aware that the Oscars were a thing, right? And I was just like, this guy better win an Oscar for this. And thank God that he did. But to me, I think I agree with you. It's probably the quintessential Denzel performance and everything, but it did kind of birth everything else that he did as well. But yeah, it's so they even say Ed Zwick's like, if you listen carefully, and I didn't do it enough this time, but he says if you listen carefully during all of that, you can actually hear Carrie Elway's crying during that scene. When Denzel's getting whipped and whatnot. So,
sometimes just the subtlety of Denzel coming up in the few words that he says are just carrying so much menace and power. And you think if you have anybody who is less talented than Denzel in that role, and you're going to hate that character because he is a very, very unlikable character, but you need to stay on the fence enough that he can win you over by the end. Mm-hmm. And Denzel can give this so complicated performance where you can almost feel the pain behind the voice, see what he's hiding from behind the eyes, so that you never completely start hating him. And I just imagine, for example, if instead of Denzel, it's Wesley Snipes.
Yeah.
And this character just ends up, you're hating him so much that you don't, they don't win you over at the end like they should. Which also, I'll tell you that when I watched this, the only other time I watched this was in high school. And because it's, over 2 hours long, we had to watch it like split up over different days.
Yeah.
So we watched it, one day we watched the first hour. The next day we watched like close to the second hour or whatever. And then we just never finished it. So I never saw like the last 30 minutes of this movie until this. So all my memory was from before. So I didn't even know about like everybody's spoiler here. Everybody dies. It's kind of like a Rogue One ending. Spoiler for Rogue One, by the way.
Yeah. It was one of the kind of brilliant things of it as well, is that like, but you missed out on the big scene and everything, your big kind of night fight there and all that kind of good stuff, which was not in the budget and not planned for, that whole night sequence.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they kind of were shooting stuff. They got a lot of things together, and then like his writer just kind of goes, "Hey, I got an idea." He goes, "Don't say it. You know what would be really cool? Don't say it. What if? Don't come on. What if we did it at night? Ah, come on." It's like, no, but it'd be really cool. We have a lot of the streaming stuff through the air here, all these big explosions and whatnot. And they were like, yeah. And then like they discussed kind of ways where you could do like a weird kind of dissolve thing to where, and they end up, I liked having kind of read this and then watching the movie and stuff, having that sort of dissolve and everything. So it's like, we don't have to shoot the whole thing at night. We start out with the kind of day thing and all that sort of stuff, and then we're hunkering down here in the kind of bunker, if you will.
I will say that transition I found to be a little jarring, maybe a little confusing to the audience. It didn't quite make sense to me, the transition from day to night on that one.
Yeah, essentially was that we wanted to end the movie at night and make it look cool.
Okay, perfect.
Which, again, is also an interesting thing, thinking about kind of the cinematography aspect of this and everything. This did win the Academy Award for Best Cinematography. And watching this on 4K, so I've got like the brand new one here from Sony and all that, brand new transfer and whatnot. It looks good, but you know what you do see a lot of in this? Things out of focus. There's a lot of soft focus shots in different things where you're just like, oh, this character should actually be in focus, not that one. That's just ever so slightly off and things like that. But it's weird that not to say that there aren't glorious, great images in this movie. There are, but like an Oscar-winning movie where I'm just going, there's a mistake, there's a mistake, there's a mistake.
I think though that it was kind of beloved for its cinematography, because if I'm remembering correctly, this is one of the first letterboxed movies I remember seeing, like out of the VHS letterbox movies.
It may have been where they're just kind of putting it out, more of a prestige kind of edition sort of thing.
I think it was maybe one for schools or something, but I do remember that being one of the first letterbox. The very first letterbox experience I remember is Ben-Hur.
Well, see, luckily for this one though, like at least if you were watching this one at school and it had your letterbox in it, it's still only 185, so it's like it's a little bit smaller and everything. You don't have to worry about like your Ben-Hur, because if you're looking at Ben-Hur on a 25-inch television back in the day, you're looking at the tiniest little strip of nothing. At least with this,
we had a 27-inch monitor, so we were good.
You went to a fancy school, did you? Hey, it was black and white though. Sure, it's got a crank on the side, but that's just how TVs were back in the day.
Powered by kerosene.
Cary Elwes was somebody who was too big of a star to be in this movie at this point. But he resonated.
It's crazy, like the trajectory of the I'm just going to say it, the trajectory of the white actors' careers versus the black actors' careers after this movie.
Yeah.
Elwes and Broderick are both like signing autographs on the con circuit, and Morgan Freeman and Denzel Washington are like eating diamond coated caviar from platinum platters.
I don't wake up before noon on any day of the week.
I don't get out of bed for less than $9 million.
But Elwes was one. He wanted to be in this and dropped his fee from what it would normally be to be in this thing and everything, which I thought was pretty cool.
He didn't get Dread Pirate Roberts money to make this?
No, sir. He was just like, all right, I'll take a little bit less to be in this thing.
Well, he nailed the Boston accent.
Hey, listen, I like how everybody's just kind of doing whatever they kind of want to do in this
these
thing.
Dialects are beautiful because they are all over the place.
Now, the only one that sounded correct to me was the guy from South Carolina, which, by the way, I grow up in South Carolina. Like, I've been to like Fort Sumter and stuff like that. So like, been to like actual, Civil War sites and all that kind of good stuff. That guy speaks like a lot of dudes I knew.
Yeah.
Just this kind of like real slow.
It's a little touch of what I call the low country boomhauer in it.
Yeah, a little bit. It's just a little bit like it's like you're not dumb, but you're certainly not. You're not a smart.
You're not
guy.
bright.
Yeah, you're not a bright guy, but you maybe you're just not the sharpest knife in the drawer. That's all. But you guys got a sweetheart on him. That's always the thing. It's just like he's a nice guy though, right? But that seemed to be the most kind of the most realistic one to me there and everything of all the characters. But it was so cool to like read about how, again, they just allowed all of these actors to kind of go through and improv and stuff and figure out where their characters were going, what their characters, past were and all that kind of good stuff. I think just really made a cohesion in this group that wouldn't be. It's kind of astounding how well they pull the whole darn thing off, to be honest, especially with all of these characters. And that was one of the things that they wanted to do in the script was like have this, have everybody kind of come from different places and whatnot. And they did have one of the, I forget where they were from, but one of the kind of, black leaders or whatever came in for like a little argument and stuff, or not an argument, but a discussion, if you will, about, what the movie is. And of course, being, a white director and everything of like, hey, what's kind of going on here? We just want to check it all out and stuff. And the basic thing that he says is like, hey, we just don't want black people represented as like a monolith or anything. And Zwick was like, whew, thank God. I was like, I got this one. No worries. Because he mentions in the script of like, hey, that was one of our things is we wanted to kind of mention where all of these people kind of came from. We had different things. We had one guy who was, a freed slave and everything. Here's another guy that was a runaway slave. This was a learned man that grew up in the North. So like we wanted to have all of these different perspectives and stuff like that. And the leader and everything was like, okay, that sounds great. And then they ate dinner and they were done. That was kind of like the extent of the conversation was just like, hey, we just don't want to be, all seen as one thing. And they were like, nope, actually, we are trying to, show the experiences breadth and wide as we possibly can here and everything. And he was like, all right, I'm satisfied with that. And ultimately, I think it works. Yeah.
I want to give another compliment to an actor that I'm afraid may fly under most people's radar, but John Finn, who plays that Irish drill sergeant guy.
Yes.
Man, I love his performance. He seems so believable. Like, I believe this is a real hard-ass drill sergeant with every step of the way. How stiff he approaches Broderick, the way he talks to him, the way he walks. He carries himself just perfectly. It's so much fun to watch, one of these kind of guys. It's a certain kind of archetype that's always enjoyable to see, particularly in a movie like this. Like, they're also good as the assistant football coach who's the hard-ass for the sweet head coach kind of guy. I love that character, and I think John Finn plays it perfectly here.
And that mustache, you can't doesn't hurt with that.
You can't beat that stash.
My word. But yeah, you do look at that guy and you're just like, yeah, that guy's racist. And of course he is. Look at him. just look at him.
I've heard that the Irish and the black folk don't get along so well. I love the conversation they're having in the background.
Hey, listen, I like how they did kind of like, they mentioned this stuff like that. I was like, well, this much is true. It's like there were many people have traded the low spot as years go by. We'll kind of try to like, oh, we're assigned it to this person now, this person now. It's been not great. So speaking of not great, though, let's talk about our buddy Matthew Broderick here. Now, what do you think?
Do you think his people were sending out for your consideration clips from this film with Broderick for Best Actor?
I don't know about post. I only kind of know actual production story here and everything.
Like, this is clearly a movie that had major Oscar aspirations. Everything about it's written out that way, and it won a couple Oscars, so it was successful. But I just wonder if part of Broderick going into this is like, okay, they're going to take me seriously because this is going to be when I win my Oscar.
Well, one of the big problems with this movie is that the producers initially, here, like I said previously, one of the kind of conditions of this movie getting going is having a name as big as Matthew Broderick's name. But one of the mistakes they did was actually tell Matthew Broderick this information. Was pretty much, we're making this movie on account of you. So as that, might put into your brain, oh, well, I'm in charge. Matthew Broderick brought a lot of bad stuff to this movie as far as
I bet,
as far as all that kind of stuff goes, because they've told, this is like he's just kind of post Ferris here and everything. His star is kind of blowing up. And he can kind of do whatever he wants. And again, the reason this movie is getting made is because the name Matthew Broderick is going to be the first name that pops up. So Matthew, what you don't know about him at this point in his career, and I don't think anybody actually knew, was that his mother was kind of running the show. Mama Broderick was
I can see that.
a bit of a puppeteer.
That's how it works.
Mm-hmm. So she wanted very specific. Now, she also comes from, as you might imagine in your Hollywood, a very kind of left-leaning, liberal type person here and everything. And of course, she had some great, heart and thought about everything and wanted very specific things to be within the movie and stuff, and things that would ultimately make the Shaw character kind of look a little bit better. And actual, some historical things. I'm not going to say that everything that they mentioned was, hogwash or anything. Some of it was probably pretty good. They're like the Emerson stuff. That's all Matthew Broderick's mom bringing that stuff in. A couple other things, but there was a whole subset where the first, I would almost say quarter of the movie, you don't even see. They ended up shooting some of it, but you don't even see it. Where, we get a whole buildup of his character and stuff, and we spend so much time with Matthew Broderick initially, but all of that stuff got cut the hell out. And let me tell you, Broderick and Mama, not happy about that set of occasions.
Well, this has gotta be strangely close to when Broderick loses he loses his momentum with Godzilla. So we still got a long way for that to happen.
Oh yeah, we're far off from him going down the toilet at this point. He's still flying high. What do you think about his actual acting in this? I mean, let's compare to what we've seen with Project X and Ferris.
I think this exposes his acting limits, that his range does not stray that far from who he is in real life. How does that sound?
No, I can see that.
Like I've seen him recently when he played Sackler, who was, was an older white man of means, and Matthew Broderick seemed to be pretty comfortable playing an older white man of means.
He fell right into it. What do you know?
Yeah. And I think he was a great Ferris Bueller, and I think he was a good, cocky young pilot for Project X. Here we start to see, I don't see him as a PTSD marred veteran of combat leading a very different kind of troop for this place where he lives. Like, I'm just not buying the weight of the world that this guy should be wearing on his shoulders, because I'm just seeing Ferris Bueller with a fake mustache and a Van Dyke goatee, which looks ridiculous anyway. He's just got, and then don't they give him a little bit of a Buster Poindexter bouffant hairdo at one point?
The hairdo and costumes and facial hair in this movie are fantastic in a good and bad way.
Do you watch Trailer Park Boys at all, Adam?
I've seen an episode or two.
Do you know who Ricky is?
I think so. That's like the Canadian Danny McBride.
Yeah, that is. So they've, he's got the poofy hair, the Van Dyke facial hair thing. And there's one point where I'm like, my goodness, they've made this Civil War colonel look like Ricky from Trailer Park Boys. Like, what's going on here? Because they just don't pull off. I don't buy that. Everybody else is great. I'm believing everyone else is from this era. Matthew Broderick is like, if Bill and Ted had got a Civil War colonel and brought him back, that's how they would have portrayed it. Like he is just not in this Oscar-winning film.
Man,
for me, I am so undersold on Broderick here, and I love Matthew Broderick, but boy, he's great in Paul Simon. He doesn't do crusty "Dear Martha, listen to this" very well.
Oh, then you are you're lucky we didn't get the Matthew Broderick edit of this babble. So get this at this point. So Broderick doesn't like a lot of confrontation, right? So he's having to talk to Zwick like on a push to talk walkie-talkie thing because like they're both in like weird locations or whatever, and they're going through. But they just. He's constantly just kind of like not saying anything. Broderick doesn't like to be confrontational, but wants everything his own way and everything. It's like one of those real kind of just nut job stuff. But again, his mom is really kind of the one that's spearheading a lot of this sort of stuff. And it's funny because Zwick's like, it's weird because I knew his father actually.
What?
He knew Matthew Broderick's father from something previously.
That is unusual.
But that didn't ingratiate him anything. And Matthew Broderick's dad had died at that point, and his mom was
sorry.
Yeah, and his mom was not to. So that didn't ingratiate him to anybody. That was just like, hey, I used to know Dad. Don't care. But he was just like, he just fought with them about a whole bunch of different things, and like it wanted at one point. They brought him into a screening and everything, but they'd forgotten to tell them that he cut out all of the expository stuff about, Shaw's backstory and all that kind of good stuff because it wasn't really needed. Ultimately, this is a movie about the 51st Regiment or whatever. It's about the regiment crew.
54th,
It's 54th. Yeah. It's about the regiment crew. It's not about, about the Shaw character really. And so they finally showed this screen for him, and they were like, oh, maybe they'll just kind of, wake up and be like, oh, you know what? This is actually really, really great. They're like, they didn't even turn around to look at us when they left. And then they went back and they're like, Matthew wants to try to cut the movie. and Zwick was like,
excuse me?
He just started laughing. He goes, what are you laughing at? He goes, no. It's like, I'm sorry, but like, I've got a final cut here. What on earth makes you think that Matthew Broderick is going to be the one to correct this thing? He's like, no, I'm not doing that. And like, they were mad and stuff. And so, but everybody was mad at each other for several years on that. Everybody's kind of made up and everything. Zwick's very nice about it in the book, I think, overall, because he kind of just goes like, Matthew was going through a lot of things at that point, from, the stardom stuff to them accidentally killing someone,
Not to change gears to too much of a bummer, but man, am I remembering things incorrectly, or did Andre Braugher pass away?
Yes, not too awful long ago.
I know, man, because that's I think I had kind of forgotten about that. Then watching this movie, that kind of triggered my memory there. But what amazed me more was that, like, I had no recollection whenever I would watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I had no recollection that Andre Braugher had been in this movie.
Yeah,
because having seen it 30 years ago, all I remember really is Denzel, Morgan Freeman, and Ferris Bueller. I didn't even remember the Dread Pirate Roberts until I rewatched it.
Well, and again, that's the wild thing, though. 1989, he was nobody before this. He'd not been never been in front of a camera before. So,
well, he's great.
Sometimes, he is really fantastic. He's one of those characters that just, like, without him or with anybody else in that role, does it work as well? I argue no.
And it's just funny to think of that skinny guy in that movie kind of becoming the Ray Holt character.
Oh yeah, Holt was just like just one of the best written characters and stuff, and him's just deadpan delivery of everything, and then like the little cutesy moments where he would get happy and everything. What an amazingly fun actor that guy was.
Maybe I don't. It's hard to pick favorites when you're talking about characters because it all depends on the mood you're in. But maybe one of my favorite gay characters in television history.
Oh yeah, exactly, and that's what I loved about it. It was like, number one, it was a character that you went on for at least 2 seasons before you realized was gay, and then it was just it's the greatest because it's like it's a nonchalant thing, and to him it's just like, I don't care. I mean, like that the whole character just didn't even think about mentioning anything like that, and it's just like he's just so much fun, that guy. And then like you got your great dramatic performances, like your in the Mist and whatnot, and like that guy's just amazing in everything he's in. Come on, will be missed big time.
It's wonderful, man. This movie has an amazing, awe-inspiring cast and Matthew Broderick. Excellent cinematography, in my opinion. I didn't really notice the out of focus stuff because I kind of, you sort of have a different measuring stick for things made in different times.
Oh yeah, and listen, I would rather it be. I would prefer it to be out of focus than for Zwick to do like a Jim Cameron where he just goes, we're going to go in and we're going to artificially make this correct. I don't want that. I'd rather it be the correct thing, because guess what? The one that's got Matthew Broderick's face a little out of focus and Morgan Freeman's face in focus, even though you're supposed to be looking at Matthew Broderick right now, that movie still won an Oscar for best cinematography. So I don't show me what actually won.
I think the nuance of the film is part of the artwork. So I don't mind stuff that you don't have to put up with in digital that, thank goodness I don't have to put up with it, but I'm glad those folks did.
No, but ultimately it does look really good, and the transfer is fantastic, even though there's nice film grain and stuff, everything in it. It's called, guess what? It was shot with film, so that's what it's supposed to look like, doggone it.
A beautiful movie.
Fantastic score. Again, that's another one that, is just one of these just all-timers.
Growing up, I don't remember if you recall the scene, Adam, but they're like marching along this path in the woods, and all of a sudden there's this little sort of jug band, impromptu band playing music.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the guys is playing spoons, and he's like holding the spoons way up in the air while he plays them. Well, like the local legend when I grew up is that guy was from not my town, but like a town near my town. So I don't know how true it was, but people spent a lot of time in the town I grew up in proud of the guy playing the spoons in this movie, because he was allegedly a renowned spoon player from our local region. And it gave me inspiration that, like, if playing spoons can get you in a movie, anything can get you in a movie.
Danny McBride, it's like, man, we had that party, had the fucking spoon man in there. Oh man. But yeah, overall, like this was a movie that, like, I was so happy to kind of go back to and everything, and I was glad that we were doing this as an assignment here and everything, the Matthew Broderick stuff, because like this had just come out in 4K and everything, so I was like, this would be a great excuse to get this. And man, oh man, if it doesn't hit you like it hits every single time, it's just It's very well written. And like, what's the time on this thing? It's long.
It's like 2 hours and 15, I think.
Yeah, it flows by pretty quick. You don't feel like, and the nice part is that even though we're in fairly dire circumstances here and everything, you never like it's not overwhelmingly grim,
It still had a little bit of the old style of showing the battle scene where the sand flies through the air and a stuntman jumps, but you're not seeing limbs and head and stuff blowing off like you'd end up getting in something like The Patriot or some of the later made movies.
Definitely, watching this feels like a great precursor to your Saving Private Ryan here and everything, because
this is
not that level
the old
yet.
style that you'll never see again.
But the good thing about that is like some of that footage that you saw in some of those war things were things that they initially shot almost before one existed, a sizzle reel. They went and shot with all of these kind of reenactments guys and stuff like that a lot that they brought on later and whatnot.
Well, I love the action sequences at the end. I mean, I'm a sucker for a good large scale battle recreation and all that sort of thing. I mean, kind of dorky like that. And I really, really enjoyed that charge that the 54th was trying to pull off and the way that it looked and the way it was shot. I enjoyed it a lot. Had good energy to it from a guy who likes that kind of thing.
And they went about it in a very smart way of like going like, hey, we have to recognize how we need to shoot all of this stuff. So they got their big giant masters and stuff, and then specifically got close-ups and everything. So they were, the idea is, hey, if every now and then you do see some of this big stuff over here, you won't think about it when we're, pushing in on the tighter stuff and there's a lot of smoke and things everywhere. So there's a lot of distracting things of that going on. So we can shoot a lot smaller without having to continue on this, ungodly giant. Because some of those battle scenes, when you get to those wide shots, there is so much stuff going on. It's like, and again, when you think about how late 80s this is and everything and how well it is shot, especially all those action scenes and stuff for the time, pretty amazing.
And I have absolute zero knowledge, like zero real world knowledge of bayonet fighting, but it looked like what I would imagine very realistic bayonet fighting would look like in these circumstances. I had a lot of fun with that too.
They did a lot of research and stuff and had a lot of from everybody from your recreators and all that kind of good stuff.
I'm not trying to get any experts to send me an email and tell me how wrong I am about it and that they had terrible form. Just let me have my movie watchers fun. It looked cool.
Hey, I keep those emails away from you,
Yes. Send them all to Jonathan.
Yeah. All right. Let's get into it. Glory from 1989. Art or fart? What say you, Bruce?
I mean, this is clearly art. Even though the biggest negative would be Matthew Broderick's performance, it's still not like it's an incompetent performance.
No,
it's just kind of fun to.
There are moments in here that you do go like, oh, and then the kind of Matthew Broderick comes through and stuff like that. Part of it is part of the dress. Part of it is there's a lot of different elements, but he is the weakest element. But even
it's fun to dogpile on Broderick a little bit just because he's so overshown. I mean, he's so out of his league in this movie. Just the way it's shot. His co-stars who just happen to all be the best at their job 20, 30, 40 years later.
Mm-hmm.
But I love it, man. It's beautifully shot. It's nostalgic feeling to me because it still kind of feels like it's from a bygone era, even though it's right there at the verge of 1990, 1989. I guess not that long ago, but it feels like, well, it probably is because it's that Batman year, 1989. Yeah. I feel like the universe changed after that in the world of cinema.
Oh, I mean, listen, I think that was
clearly art. It's visual art. The writing is art. There might even be some educational value to this. I have no idea if there's a accurate lesson to be learned or not, but it is something they showed me in school.
Yeah.
And
they continue to show.
Preachy, not too preachy, not as white savior as you think it's going to be.
And that was one of the things that they were scared of it trying to be some white savior thing, and they certainly didn't want that. And of course, the more Shaw that they ended up cutting out, the more that it was definitely not meant to be that specifically. So that's, if anybody wanted to be more of a white savior thing, it was probably Matthew Broderick's camp.
Yeah, considering that the source material was written by a white man during the Civil War, it comes across as not as problematic as you'd think. You know what I mean? Like the source material were his letters home, and it could have potentially been a lot rougher than it was.
Well, the good thing is, though, is that they don't overly make him out to be like he is, like the Christ-like figure of all this. He's saving everybody. He's all this. He's at least enough of a convicted character and stuff. So he's got flaws. He's not perfect. He misjudges things and doesn't, understand everything that's going on. He makes some wrong choices and stuff. So I do like that aspect of it.
Also, no one is saved. I mean, you know what I mean? The glory is earned by people, but no, he doesn't save anybody. They all die. Mm-hmm. It's not like they were all about to die and he by himself charged up and saved the day or told them how to do it. I mean, he bit the dust and then it was left to them to go off and do their business. But he was definitely not a white savior when he's the first one to die at the fight.
Yeah. But it was about everybody, like, because the movie is about so many things at the same time too. It's not only about slavery and black. It's just also about being men and wanting to step up and kind of do the right thing and just wondering where your place in society is, especially having just kind of been introduced into society, so to speak. So we're trying to find yourself, trying to find a purpose for where you're going and something that you're actually proud in, something that you're worth fighting for and everything. And at a time when that's got to be something that's very difficult to seem to want to fight for, or at least with that particular, who's to say? It's a time with which we'll never understand because we're so far removed from it and everything.
Well, but knock on wood.
But it's a fantastic movie that like you said, it continues to be used in education. That's one of Zwick's things that he says is like, listen, the movie can make money at the box office, and that's a temporary, fleeting thing or whatever. Critics can come in, and he's just like, critics don't mean anything anymore. But you know what? This movie's still shown, as an educational tool for kids and stuff to say like, hey, here's what this particular group of men went through and everything and stuff. And it's, it's educational, it's good, and because it's done as well as it is, it will grab you. It will make you go like, oh, this is something that I need to pay attention to. And it makes it real, and I think that's what, history through cinema has done such a fantastic job with it, be it like this movie or Saving Private Ryan or any of the other ones that are kind of talking about things of war. They're taking the ideas and things that we've heard, over the years and everything and kind of showing this what maybe not a 1,000% accurate representation, but as close as we'll ever get to it. And I think it's a very valuable tool for education cinema, especially for dum-dums that like me that, can't pay attention for more than 2.5 hours. So this is art. This is art for me all the way. There were several moments in this that, still hit as they always do. And if you're not rolling tears several times during this film, you may have, no heart in your chest. Go take a look. See if one's there. I don't know. But yeah, so that's an art for me. And if Sweet Chauncey was here, I'm sure he'd say art as well. That's just a guess.
Yes.
But that is it. We are continuing our Matthew Broderick train here. We've been staying in kind of the late 80s and everything, but we're skipping ahead 10 years to 1999 as we are talking Election from director Alexander Payne. And again, we'll find out if in this movie, why Reese Witherspoon after this movie would never be billed after Matthew Broderick again. Oh, by the way, just because we got to remember some of these cues. Matthew Broderick, is there anybody else that could have played this role other than
anyone
him?
Else who could? Yes, other than Matthew Broderick.
But would they? Okay, let me. It's
a lot of people. Apparently, the producers didn't think so.
But in 1989, to be able to sell this movie, that's the tough one.
I still think he could have done better. Who's my hit parade from 1989? I might get confused, but I think by then Tom Cruise gives you a performance more in line with what your other people are giving.
Well, I will tell you this: that was the first name on Ed Zwick's lips at this point, because that was kind of the thing. But he was also too big at that point where they could not get him.
Yeah, it's what I'm trying to say. Is I don't know exactly what the spectrum number value is on Matthew Broderick, but I think, I don't know that you needed him to sell this movie as much as the producer seemed to think, because I think he had enough star power with Ulwes and Morgan Freeman to move this thing along. But anyway, yes, it definitely could have been somebody besides Broderick. I'll go ahead and say Tom Cruise. They couldn't afford him. They should have talked him down. Who's another actor from then? I'd like Nick Cage doing this.
I think they said there was at one point.
Fit here.
I think they said at one point maybe Emilio Estevez maybe was one name.
No, I wouldn't have wanted to see that.
No, you wouldn't.
I might have wanted to see Charlie.
And that's how they also kind of like wrongfully, they knew it wasn't true when they kind of pitched it. They were just kind of like, oh, it'll be kind of like Platoon, a couple of big action scenes, but it's mostly like a small kind of story here and everything. The budget won't be all that big. It was that was a lie. This budget was huge and all that other kind of good stuff. So,
what about one more name that I would throw out there? Let's see. I already said Nicolas Cage. No, I don't have any other names to throw out there. I thought I had one right on the tip of my nose.
No, like, what's Sean Penn doing at this point?
Oh man, Sean Penn is
he would be
able to hang. He'd definitely be able to hang.
I just don't like. He's still too blonde. I don't know that you could have taken maybe in the Carrie Elways role or something like that. Maybe.
What's Patrick Swayze doing in '89?
Not this.
He's already done the blue and the gray, and he was pretty good.
Yeah, listen.
Imagine Patrick Swayze being from Boston. It's almost like Arnold Schwarzenegger being from Chicago.
I'm from Chicago. Shut up.
Because Patrick Swayze can do a lot of things when he acts, but he doesn't ever lose his Texas accent.
Not much.
So I like the idea that here is this guy from Boston, and he sounds like he ought to be playing General Lee instead of General Shaw, Colonel Shaw here.
And just one final recommendation, just because I did it in preparation for this, and I also kind of wanted to know it and read it anyways. Check out Ed Zwick's book, Hits, Flops, and Other Illusions, my 40-something years in Hollywood. Really interesting book. Goes through all of this kind of big...
How long is the audiobook?
Let's see, 7 hours ish, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Because I like to push the 8 hours plus. So
I do too. Like this one's good enough for I think it's a decent enough length for you with everything. You get a good breadth of his career and stuff, and all the way from your 30-something years to like this being his like big first movie, And it gets all of this, accolades and stuff like that. And he kind of, I don't know if they've ever done him on Blank Check, but boy, he'd be a Blank Check podcast to listen to for sure. Because after this, he just got like thing after thing after thing of just like, hey, we'll give you whatever you want. You're going to give us another Denzel flick? Why not? Let's do one of those. And he would go on to work with Denzel again, thank God. So they had a fantastic relationship. So as much as that scene might have been like, ooh. It worked out in the end, so I guess that's all that counts. So that is it, everybody. Join us next week when we're talking election from director Alexander Payne and co-stars Reese Witherspoon. For the absent Sweet Sean Zakovacs from the internet, Bruce Leslie, I'm Anna Portress, reminding you that the only difference between art and fart is an F.